good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. I'm super excited to welcome you to our very first Meet the Giants webinar from Magic Beans Agency. And today we have two giantesses of our industry, two ladies who have a huge amount of knowledge and experience in the realm of content, in the realm of marketing, in the realm of positioning. So we have Lee Densmer, who is the leader of Globia Content Marketing. And Lee has 20-something years of experience in the localization sector and has worked in lots of different roles and worked for large companies like Moravia and RWS. And we have Mimi Moore, who has another 20-something years of experience in the localization industry, both in production and in marketing. And we just realized today that we'd worked for some of the same companies. And then my name is Robert Martin, the founder of Magic Beans Agency. So I was thinking between the three of us, we probably have about as much experience as share. We were super excited to do this webinar today to share our perspectives in this time, which is dominated by technology conversations and really fast evolutions. It's not often that sales and marketing gets a look in these public forums. What we're trying to do is connect you guys to these experts so that we can learn from them and help you guys to apply some of the things that they've picked up and best practices in making your team more successful. So, ladies, do you want to say hello to the group?
Sure. Hello. Some of you know me, some of you don't. Nice to meet you all. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to be here. Thanks for that intro, Robert. When you tell people I've got 25 years experience, of course, that means that I'm 40 because I started when I'm 15. So there'll be no questions or jokes about my age.
Yeah, Lee, maybe we should stop using the 20-year thing.
I know.
We just take that out. So,
is that way too long?
Way too long. I'm really excited to be here with Lee, following up on our article from Multilingual from last fall, where we wrote about differentiators and what LSPs can do, and talking about it in a little bit more detail today with Robert. So this is going to be great.
And before I go any further, remember, aloe vera and Botox are our friends. So everybody bear that in mind. We're talking about differentiators. We're in an industry where, if we think about language service providers, there's between 20 and 30,000 language service providers out there. As individuals, we want to stand out and be ourselves, but as companies, we also want to stand out from the crowd. So ladies, let's start with the fundamentals. What exactly is it that we mean by differentiators?
To me, it simply means unique qualities. And we'll talk in a minute about what qualities are not unique that you see out there. So a unique, singular thing about your company that others can't claim. I also call it an ownable point of difference, which means it's yours. Others may have similar differentiators, but you just use the word over and over again. Yours is unique. Mimi, would you characterize it differently than that?
No, the same way. Do some introspection. The way to think about it is figure out what's unique to you, what's unique to your firm that sets you apart from others.
Yeah. And of course, it's a very busy marketplace. So why do we think that companies find it difficult to define or to create these differentiators?
There's a fear of limiting. There's a fear of being too specific or not including someone. But I think that not being everything to everyone and finding your niche is actually an advantage because it helps you focus on what you can do best. Because if you're being too broad, you can't excel at everything. So if you can focus down, you could be very specific about what you can do well.
It's so hard in our industry because fundamentally, we all do the same thing. Often we all use the same resources. The same linguist literally works for more than one of us. And we sell into the same industries. There's a lot of sameness across the board with these 20, 30,000. That number just blows my mind. 20, 30,000 LSPs fundamentally doing the same things. Great, but that's what makes it hard. It's also where there's a huge opportunity to stand out. But I mean, what we're talking about isn't easy. We're going to share with you how to do it. But it's an industry where we all essentially do the same thing.
And also it's because of how the industry has evolved as well. Like many people started out as translators who then developed their own teams or their own companies. They didn't want to necessarily pigeonhole themselves in one particular area or to say no to work. It was so important to always be able to say, yes, I can do that,
Yeah.
that they end up, and indeed they can do lots of different things, but jack of all trades, master of none
Yep.
principle. And it does make us more and more difficult to stand out from the crowd because of this tendency not to define these differentiators well. It then pushes us into other situations, such as the dreaded RFPs or the dreaded procurement procedures, where we'll be in a group of 20 or 30 language service providers that procurement has picked out of a hat, and they all look similar enough. And then we're left trying to fight on things like service level agreements or who's able to provide the lowest price or the fastest turnaround time. What other pitfalls can we fall into?
There's a risk of being too generic because you're trying to appeal to everybody. And there's no way to appeal to everybody without being milk toast and very bland. And so you really do need to drill down and figure out who are your ideal customers and what are they worried about? What do they want? And focus on those traits for them. And a way to do that is through competitive research. Research, talk to these people, find out what they want, and then start thinking about how you solve their problems in your own unique way. And that's getting on the path to starting to find your differentiators. What do you think, Lee?
And yeah, you use the word unique again. So one of the key things I see when I do competitor research for my clients, I see LSPs talking about the same things over and over again. And often those are what I call table stakes differentiators. Like, you got to have good linguists. You got to have a quality process. You have to use technology. So when I see LSPs talking about these same things over and over again, they just blend to me. So I'm not saying it's not important to talk about highly trained linguists or the use of technology, but it's important to find something else as well that causes you to rise to the top when everybody's using the same differentiators in air quotes. That's what I'm talking about, right? So if you look at these differentiators that everybody talks about as their top differentiators, if everybody talks about it, then there's nothing unique. So number of languages is a big one. Everybody says we do 200 or 300 languages. And if that's your differentiator, you're not really different. Customized solutions is another one that every single LSP talks about. Again, if you're not customizing your solutions, then you're not playing in the market very well. If you're not a partner, if you don't have a customer-centric approach, same thing. So when you're talking about these, you're really putting forward differentiators that are table stakes. They're a given. Like you have to have these experienced PMs. So they're not real differentiators. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mimi, would you?
Technology is another one. Everybody's using CAT tools. Everybody has TMS. Everybody's using NMT. What makes your approach to these solutions different or unique or for your customers?
I was going to say that I think it's like we said before, that we know that clients and buyers have like a checklist of things that they expect to see. So yes, this is why we say these things and why we use these things. We have to let them know that we have some of these features or characteristics. But like Mimi said earlier on, the goal is not to be bland. The goal is to stand out, to appear different, and also to find the people that you want to work with and who really want to work with you. So if we're saying then that these are non-unique or differentiators that are too common, they're what we call table stakes, what do we think are examples of better differentiators?
Something that's a true differentiator is around why you do what you do. What's your mission? How you do what you do? What's your methodology or your process that's different from everybody else's? Can you articulate it in a way that makes you sound different? Any specific difference? So when I explore this with LSPs, it's often around the reason you're in business in the first place or the way you do the same old things.
Some others might be, do you have a specific focus? I feel like I'm the one who's talking always about the focus, but focusing on things like language access, focusing on things like certain industries. And even with industries, you have to be careful because you can say you focus on legal or life sciences, but why or how, because there are other agencies or LSPs out there that also focus on these industries. So how do you do things differently? Why should they choose you?
If we haven't done it by now, now is really the time when we have to do it, because with the advent of technology and all of these things that are available to us, even if you think about marketing and sales tools and technologies, we've never had so many things that are available to us to help us with our messaging, our branding, all the things that we want to do. But I think we know that we're in an industry which is changing rapidly and evolving rapidly. Also, our clients' industries are changing as well, right? So we have to react to that, and we have to work out, okay, I'm in 2024. In the next 5 years, who do I think my clients are going to be? Who do I want them to be? Is what I'm putting out there in the world, on the internet, in my emails, in my sales communications, is that reflective of where I want to go?
So I was working with a company, their main differentiator, they really wanted it to be their use of tech. And I was explaining this, great, use of tech is critical. You have to use tech. And we were exploring what way they use tech. And after a couple conversations, it became clear that they had literally a 5-point methodology, a 5-point foundation. And I said, there it is. Nobody else has a 5-point methodology for this. So you need to surface that in your communications, because that is your point of difference, the framework around their use of tech. It took some digging, but this person really had it formed in his head how to approach it. Same differentiator, right? But their approach was quite unique after we started digging for it.
And I guess the other thing to remember is, like, we're not competing with everybody. We're not competing with 20,000
Also
different LSPs at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a subset of the market that we want to differentiate ourselves from. Like a small boutique player in, I don't know, Malta or Greece is not the same as a Lionbridge or a We Localize or an RWS. Okay, so you guys have created a process for our audience, which is essentially a methodology that they can follow themselves with their team, with your help as well. We're also available to help you guys out. Let's go through it step by step.
So the first phase should be research. And we encourage you to be brave, be bold, think outside the box. And part of this doing research is checking out your competitors, see what they say. Part of it is you can see what's being overused and how they're positioning themselves. And then that way you have the information to know, okay, are we in the same category as them? How can we step aside? How can we be different than what the messaging for all of the others is? And then also not only think about what you're doing now, what your differentiators are now, but it's alluding to what, Robert, you were saying just a minute ago, is where do you want to be in 5 years? And what differentiators can help you get there? What are your customers going to be thinking about? What differentiators will appeal to them going forward? And then another part of collecting information and doing research is talking to people who are customer facing in your organization. So that would be like the salespeople, the account managers, get the leadership involved, because they're often at trade shows, conferences, talking to other leadership from other LSPs. Find out what are they hearing out there in the market from the customers, and start collecting that information. And if you're really lucky to have customers who love to have these kinds of research-based conversations with you, they're the best folks to talk to. So talk to them about, why did they choose you? What appealed about your company? What appealed to them? And why did they pick you to work with? And then that information will help you to build the next step, which is figuring out who we are.
You're going to see themes. Things are going to bubble up to the top. You're going to get a mess of data and a mess of information. You can even use ChatGPT to synthesize it, but your points of difference will start to bubble up to the top through this process. When the next step is to figure out who you are, like, who do you want to be when you grow up? And a lot of companies already think this is clear, but once they start digging, it's really not, or it's more nuanced or subtle than they thought. And these are some things that you can look at as you're trying to figure this out. So look at your founding story. So there's a couple LSPs who are founded by refugees or immigrants, and there's a really cool story there. And that influences how the company is run. It influences how projects are run. So that heritage story is possibly a differentiator. Look at your brand personality. Are you sassy? Are you academic? That brand personality will allow you to resonate with certain target customers who are really a good fit for you. So if you have a unique brand personality, that can be a differentiator. Look at your corporate mission. Mimi mentioned language access. A lot of organizations that focus on language access are very mission or purpose driven. They feel strongly about changing lives and eliminating language barriers. So do many life sciences organizations. Look at your mission. What's the drum you guys are all beating to? I mentioned before, look at methodologies or approaches that differ. How you do something differs than how somebody else may. And if you can surface that, like with your 5-point framework, that's awesome. And then as Mimi mentioned, do you focus on unique industries? Is your language focus unique, or are your services unique? There are slight differences in the services that LSPs are putting out there. Get a whiteboard out, put all of that on it, do it virtually or in person, put 30 or 40 things on the whiteboard.
This is also relevant to us as individuals as well. If we're talking about your personal brand and talking about what you're putting out on LinkedIn, or I don't know, if you are like the evangelist for a specific vertical or a specific type of client in your company.
Mm-hmm.
But also I'm thinking this kind of question of who are we? It seems to come up more and more these days in the generations that have come up through the ranks. Like we talk about millennials and snowflakes and people who want to work with people who share the same values. Is that a generational thing now as well? Is it going to become more and more important? Whereas before it was, are you able to do the translation? Are you able to provide the quality? Okay, tick. Whereas now it's like, I know I can work with so many other companies. I want to work with people who look like me or talk like me or share the same passion as me.
Yes. So research shows that about 40% of people buy with that in mind. Does this company align with my values, even at the B2B level? Definitely at the B2B level. You can think of mission-led brands, Patagonia, and people are very loyal to them because of their mission. Same with B2B. So if you can surface a story that allows buyers in younger generations to resonate with you, that is a differentiator.
And I would just add, as we were coming up, brands weren't so vocal about their mission and where they stand on things at all. No one talked about those kinds of things. And so today, brands are much more vocal about taking a stand politically or with the environment or on different issues. And so I think that it makes a big difference when, as a differentiator for those brands, because these younger generations of people want to work with them. And here in Europe, it's almost a purchasing criteria. When RFPs are out, European companies are asking, do you have an environmental policy? What's your sustainability policy? Do you work with women-owned businesses? All of these kinds of things that before they never asked this kind of stuff. And today it's much more important. So that's definitely part of your brand personality, I think.
I think localization teams or localization owners, though, within these companies have traditionally been very guarded about the kind of information they share with prospective partners or LSPs, maybe because they get so many approaches into so many, or they don't want to limit themselves, they want to overcommit or compromise themselves. But yeah, maybe there's a task as well. I think we're going to talk about validating what we do, but there's a task related to talking to some of these people and asking them, what are your values? Is it about paying the translators well, or having a social conscience, or giving back to a community or something as well? So I think that's something we can also talk to the clients about, you know? So what's the next step then? It's putting it all together?
One more note on brand personality, though. I would say your personality may align with your customer base too. Like if you are working with a lot of legal clients, you may not want to be showing up in like your beachwear with your flowered shirts and your swim trunk. You might want to align with your customers' expectations to a certain degree. They expect to work with a certain kind of group of people. Life sciences people are a bit more serious. They're facing a lot of regulatory and compliance regulations. You need to also be mindful of what your customers are, what their environment is, and how they operate as you're choosing your brand personality and how much to show.
Of course, you said be brave, but don't be crazy, right?
Don't be
brave.
crazy.
We also said, though, that this is the starting point, right? The differentiators that we identify, that we get to, is the starting point for what comes next. So that's going to inform your positioning, your brand, your tone of voice, your content strategy, your online strategy. All of those things come afterwards. It's not something that you can do overnight. That's why people like Lee and Mimi exist, to help you. It takes time and it takes effort, is what I'm trying to say. And this is the first kind of ownable thing you need to get right so you can move on to the next stage and the next stage. How do we put it all together then? What do we do?
So Lee said you take all your items, put them on a whiteboard. I imagine a big Miro board if you're working virtually, or maybe a bunch of sticky notes stuck on a wall with everybody's ideas. You circle back to, again, what Lee started our conversation with, those ownable points, the things that you do differently yourself that really set you apart. The next item, keep drilling by asking how and why. This is like when you're doing a root cause analysis and you want to find out why something happened, and people are like, well, this is why. Well, is that really it, or is there something beneath that? So you start digging and you keep digging, saying why and how, and eventually you do get to that differentiator that sets you apart. So don't go with the surface level, the easy answers. You're trying to get away from those differentiators. We already know what those are. The linguists, there's a certain number of languages. Just keep drilling. How? Why?
I like the why because it reminds me of when you go to like a psychologist or a coach or a trainer and you say, I want this. And they say, why? And you said, because it'll make me happy. Why will it make you happy? Because I don't know, it's like you keep on drilling down on the why. And maybe you get to another kernel of truth, like a central point, which you can then hang things on in the future, like a guiding point of difference.
These processes with messaging always feel a little bit like B2B therapy, right? Because you are digging past the comfortable to find the bits that rise to the surface. So let's go with that analogy, Robert. It's a little bit like B2B therapy. Mimi, why only 3?
Yes. Well, first, all I can think about is when you're in therapy, they're always like, and how does that make you feel? That question. So maybe you could skip that question as you're working through your differentiators. So the reason to pick only 3 is because once you start choosing what your differentiators are, if you choose more than 3, you start running the risk of getting into that territory or getting back into that territory of the watered down differentiators. So pick your 3 strongest. If you really, really can't stick only to 3, no more than 5. That is definitely the cut it off point, but try and stick it only to 3 of the ones that are the strongest and the ones that really resonate and make you stand out from the pack.
So if this is not a one and done thing at all, I would say review them annually, bring the same people back together. That's what we should talk about, Robert. Also, guys, who should be involved? Who should be at the table when we're doing these exercises?
Yeah.
Review them regularly. Do this annually. Are we still the same? Do we still have the same differentiators? Has our strategy shifted? Have we adopted new technology? Did we add a whole language set? And refine these as your business evolves. So be aware that this is an organic living thing. So Robert and Mimi, who should come to the table for this differentiation exercise?
Top of my list would be a project manager to run the meetings, keep people accountable, get a schedule, keep things on track. But in my world, the project manager is like the most important person always in the room.
Because I work on like a client-facing perspective, I would want the people who talk to the clients directly, who hear back from the clients directly to be involved. But of course, you have the money, right? Who's paying for this? Your CEO or your MD is going to want to put their stamp of approval on anything that we come up with. So whoever that kind of leader in the organization is, or even if it's the operations leader as well, who has to drill it down through the production team, they should all probably also have a seat at the table so that their production team is also highlighting these differentiators, whether it's part of the culture or how they interact with the clients, etc. I would argue there's a few people that need to be there.
I
Yeah.
would build a team for this exercise of no more than 8 people. 8 people sounds like a lot to me. You've got your project manager, right? Keeping everything on the rails, but you need, like Robert said, customer service because they're close to your client. You need sales, representation, a leader. You need a marketing leader, marketing representation. And then, as Robert said, you need the C-level representation. That's your executive sponsor. Your CEO probably has a strong opinion about differentiators. So those are the people I would have on the group. And like I said, no more than 8. I mean, I think we've all been part of these exercises where you've got 20 people in the room and it's just a hot mess and you can't get anywhere. So you make some decisions as a group, and then those must be socialized. Because if you have an organization that doesn't understand or align with your differentiators, it makes it very hard to sell and execute. There's the group that does the work, and then there's the group that kind of vets or validates or blesses the work.
Quick question for both of you before we move on. With regard to brand personality, how do you guys feel about branding to be different? Like, do you feel that more LSPs should be making a more conscious effort to, I don't know, liven up their visual branding, their voice, their tone of voice? Because again, we are guilty of speaking in very similar ways. You can even see on the top websites, there's all this blue and white everywhere.
Blue.
You know, blue for trust. How do you guys feel about shaking things up? What are your thoughts on that?
Part of that being brave part and not watering things down to appeal to everybody. Let your personality shine through. That's a great way to set things apart. So
I'm going to call out a brand in a minute. We weren't going to call out brands on this call, but there's one who really looks different, and it's Local Ipsum. Check out their website. I typed it in the chat. Take a look and then type in the chat what you think. But they're different. Everybody looks the same. Everybody sounds the same. Across the industry, we sound as an industry really stiff and academic. That is not who we are. We love to travel. We love to eat. We love technology. We love words. Like, we are more exciting than that. And there are people behind every single brand that we're talking about here, but there's very little personality that shows through in the industry's websites.
We have all these passionate linguists, you know, who I've never met a more passionate bunch about what they do and how proud they are about it, and the countries they come from. That these things need to come out and really shine through.
So these are our 4 phases or our 4 steps to finding our true differentiators. Then we go through this exercise. What happens next? So we have another slide up here, which I'll pull up. This is about, so how do we deploy our new differentiators, our new messaging?
There's 2 parts of where to use and rolling it out. For where to use, you need to get those differentiators into all of your content, your blog, your social, on your website. Make sure your landing pages all reflect the new messaging and the new positioning. All your sales materials need to have it as well. So be thinking about things like cheat sheets and battle cards for your sales team so they can really address what makes you different versus your competitors. And then all your customer touch points. So this would be things like emails, PowerPoint presentations, as well as all your collateral, a web that expands out into everything that's part of your brand and that your company uses.
Please reinforce and keep on going. Over communicate, basically.
Every touch point is a vehicle for your brand. Yeah, as Mimi said, all your content, but also all your conversations. So rolling it out, it is of no use to do all this exercise and just put it in a document and stick it on SharePoint. You need to train your teams on it. What do our differentiators mean? How do you speak to our differentiators? That's a script. How do you speak to our differentiator? How is it different from our competitors? So there's a training that needs to be put together and given live. Battle cards are useful also, in case that term wasn't familiar to me until a couple of years ago. So that's a card that you develop for sales that describes your differentiators versus your competitors and how to speak to or against the differentiators. Reception means understanding how it's received in the market, and that comes through ongoing conversations with sales about the way your differentiators have been perceived. to make sure you've gotten it. And that's part of what I mean about how it's not one and done. Based on the read that you're getting from the market, you would make shifts or make changes. So we have that there as part of rollout. Make sure you keep your finger on the pulse of how people are feeling about your brand.
Yeah, I was going to say the training should probably also extend to how people communicate on social media, especially if you're using, like, let's say, social media accounts for sales or promoting your positioning or thought leadership. All of those, like anybody who's in your team who's communicating via social media should be doing that in a somewhat consistent way, so that it's not like, oh, today my brand differentiator is this, tomorrow it's going to be that. It needs to be constant and consistent across a period of time. And I guess also in the future, like, of course, things evolve. We have to react to what happens in the marketplace. But I suppose when stuff comes up, we have to ask ourselves, okay, so now there's this new technology. Is that going to be something we adopt? Is that going to be part of our brand story? Or is it just another technology? We have to be able to reject things as well as we come across them and thinking in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I would add leadership is really important in the rolling it out phase, that leadership needs to be united. Everybody needs to be singing from the same hymn book, so to speak. The messaging and the differentiators, everyone in senior leadership needs to be saying the same thing and pointing that out, reinforcing the message so it continues to trickle down or trickle throughout the organization. And people tend to start to follow by example. If that's what the leadership is saying, it'll sink in and they'll start saying those things as well as they talk to customers. Really important.
Thanks, guys. That's been fantastic. I think it's been really, really useful for our attendees. And you guys have put together a worksheet as well, which I have, I think, here. So we're going to share this worksheet with everybody who registered for the event, and you can take it home and sit down and start working all this stuff out. You can also reach out to Lee or to Mimi or to myself if you guys need help. Like I say, it's a starting point. It's important. It's an exercise definitely worth doing with the right stakeholders and right people in your business. And then there's a lot of work to do that needs to happen afterwards as well, right? But ladies, thank you so much. What I want to do is see if we have any questions or comments from the floor. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys. Now you can all unmute yourselves if you like and be noisy and rowdy and challenge us.
Or type your question. Yeah.
Or type your question too. That's also allowed. So I'll pause the share for a second and see if we have any questions here.
Before everyone warms up to the question thing, I have a question which is always on my mind.
Yes.
So I'll take the opportunity just to hear what you guys have to say. So those unique points that you were talking about from a small to medium LSP point of view, are they the ones that will translate to both direct customers and, let's say, bigger LSPs, for example?
Potentially not. It depends. That's a big topic out there at the moment. My personal opinion is that there is a disconnect between, let's call it the freelance community and the LSP community, but also between what we would call the SLV or the single language vendor, the one or two language specialist companies, and the big super LSPs, the giants. So there's this whole ecosystem, but there's quite a bit of disconnection in there. There's a lot to pack in there. So I think it depends. For example, if part of your differentiator is I'm a specialist in luxury fashion or jewelry or makeup, then yeah, that's going to be valid to both a direct client segment and specific LSPs. Potentially things like values as well. I'm into supporting the environment or, I don't know, refugees or whatever it might be.
That's a nuanced answer. I think you've mostly gotten it. My framework has been about bigger business, B2B. So it's an interesting question that needs to be explored.
I think there could be a little bit of overlap for things like Robert said, if they're talking about what issues they back, we are about supporting the environment or sustainability and things like that. You definitely could have some overlap. And let's face it, the world is not as big as we think. So there's not going to be an endless supply of differentiators out there. There could be some commonality between people's or companies' differentiators?
I think one of the reasons that I think sales and marketing and this kind of topic is so interesting and important for LSPs of all sizes right now is because things are changing at a very rapid pace. Technology and generative AI is becoming something big. It's changing, it's going to impact our industry, but it's going to impact the industries that we support as well. So we don't really know yet how everything is going to pan out. We don't really know if the super LSPs are going to continue outsourcing large amounts of work to the smaller LSPs or to the freelancers, or if work is going to increase, decrease, change completely. There's a lot of unknown factors. My personal view is that every LSP needs to sit down and think about these things and think about where they want to go and who they want to be over the next few years. Because if they don't take a proactive approach, then it'll be reactive and they may be caught off the hook and lose a lot of revenue or lose clients. So I think they need to be proactive.
Yeah.
Do it now. And if you need help, you know where to come. Do we have any other questions from our audience?
My question has to do with the profile of the consultant. We have worked with many consultants over the years. We have 20 years in the business. We never had an awesome experience. Like, it's always been okay. And when we go online with a new website, a revamped website, and the speech and our pitch and everything that we say, it doesn't take very long for us to see the same words, the same sentences, complete sentences in our competitors' websites. And we are very proactive and active in changing all the time and not really thinking this has to be static. What would you suggest for smaller companies that don't have huge budgets and can't come up with and don't have, because the reality is that we all do basically the same thing and we are tied because we're not decision makers. We are given what to do and we don't have much of a choice. So what would be the suggestion from you, experts, in this regard? So what profile of company or consultant should be used? What direction should we take?
I don't think
I know
you
it's a
need
tough one.
I don't think you truly need a consultant. And take a look at our worksheet. Hopefully it helps you. So in your case, Cecilia, you're a women-owned business, in part at least. What's there? Explore that. What does that mean for how you run the business? What does that mean for what your values and mission is? Start there. That's a point of difference. Yes, that's what I would guide you.
Well, we were that this happened also. We thought that was our differentiator. Next year, the following year, we had all our competitors, women owned in Argentina, becoming certified. So it stopped being. So it's very difficult to keep it for a year. Have a strategy for one entire year is very difficult. So it's challenging, right?
Cecilia, what is the problem statement though? Are we talking about like a positioning? Are we talking about which clients we want to go after? Like, have you defined the specific problem statement first of all? Because the kind of team that you need to put together is going to be based on that. Is it about, for example, getting more direct clients or getting more LSP clients or going into new niches, or like, do you know what that question is?
This is the work we're doing this year now, so as to separate ourselves from everybody else. Everybody's selling talent in Argentina now. So we started doing that, and that's really not where we want to go. We don't want to go where everybody goes.
Right.
So it's always work in progress. It's never ending. And yes, that's the work we're doing now, becoming very solid in the way that we work, the proposal that we have, and maybe the niche, what kind of segment we want to work with. That's the only thing that we can think of today, because the reality is with 20 years in the business, we have experience with basically everything, right? But it doesn't mean that you have to talk about all of that all the time, but maybe try to go after one certain market. And at the beginning, we started thinking about competing with our own customers because most of our clients are MLBs. But the reality is that we are not multilingual vendors. We are regional language vendors. And Spanish is already huge enough. We can focus on our Spanish, the different flavors of Spanish, the region as a whole, and becoming more of a partner in the terms of consultancy to land in the region, have a soft landing, and not so much linguistic, but it's more of a comprehensive service.
So it'd be fun to do a brainstorm with you, and one of us can facilitate
Yeah.
a brainstorm. That would be fun. That's fun work. Another thing that you're describing that's super interesting is that as you're doing this work, you go back and look at the services you're offering. It causes you to question what you're offering. Why are we offering that? Should we be offering that? This work literally impacts every part of your business. And it will rewind you to what you're offering for whom and how. Yeah.
Yep.
All those questions come
Definitely.
up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add as well, I'm doing a workshop later in the year for Elia, but one of my ideas for people who have similar challenges is, well, two things. So one would be to make a list of industries that you're not in that are up and coming industries, the industries that we don't even know about yet. There's new things happening around the world all of the time. Like we know, okay, blockchain, crypto, biotech, but what are the new trends that are popping up or the new kind of growth areas, like what driverless traffic, or I don't know how you call these things, that what are the new industries that we don't even know about? That's one thing. And the second thing is you can do more than one thing at a time. It makes things more complicated. It makes things more difficult from a production perspective, but your brand, you can have different divisions or different vertical focuses as well, which you can divide and have different owners or strategies or messaging for those things as well. So you could say, look, I'm going to try to be the best SLV possible to my big MLB clients, but I'm also going to identify one or two niches that I want for me that are a growth area in my continent or in my region where I know I can be close to my clients and go and see them and add value and help them to negotiate technology. We can do research with you to help you work out what they are and go from there.
Thank you.
I'd just add, you guys already do, I think, a fantastic job about your main differentiators being a women-owned business and profiling the four of you. That is something that I think you really excel at. It comes through in all of your messaging, your website, your social media. I see it constantly, and I applaud that. And I would just echo what Robert said a little bit. Think about, where do you want to be next year and the year after? What technologies are coming? How can you align your business to start to move in those areas, and think maybe those are future revenue streams that you can start to tap? Things like he said, cryptocurrency, blockchain, but what about things like gaming, which is such a huge market? There's people spend more money on gaming than movies. The revenue there potentially for it to be localized and globalized is huge. There's alternate revenue streams other than just translating software and IT.
And of course, the IT companies are going to adopt the technology sooner than anybody else. So that revenue is in danger. Margarita, you had a question.
I was thinking about social media, and if you have any tips on how to build trust using social media, which I find is very difficult. So I'll give you an example. I try to be more involved this year. It's one of my main objectives. I publish a blog and I share it on social media. It does more or less. And then maybe it's International Language Day, and I go, oh, International Language Day, I speak Galicia, I'm from Galicia. I put a picture that I took and nothing. He goes mad. He gets thousands of impressions and views, and I go, okay, right. So it's interesting to me that something that I feel this is a good blog, it's technical, people will like it, it solves a problem, we should do well. Nothing. And then some silly stuff that I think of, he does very well. So any tips you have for me to see if there is any type of content that you think it will help me get that idea across for specifically, obviously, for simultrans of how to build trust. Like, we are a company, we are a long-term company, we are 40 years in business. That means we have a lot of experience. How do I put that across in a kind of social media?
You've given us 2 minutes for a 2-day topic. So I'm gonna be very brief and then hand that off to Mimi. You have to figure out your points of view and write about that and add value in every post with your personality. Okay. Add value in every post. Don't send people out to a blog. Excerpt the blog. Put main points from the blog post in the post. Put the link in the comments. Half of the battle is posting, only half. The other half of the battle is engaging. So if you are not following other accounts and commenting on other accounts and reaching out to people, your reach will be impacted. Posting is like the tip of the iceberg that shows above the water, and engaging is the other half. So that's one of the quickest things I diagnose when I see flat social media accounts is the quality of the post, the nature of the post, the format of the post, and then B, the engagement strategy behind it. Mimi, 1 minute.
When you described what was happening, what struck me was that you posted a picture and that did well, but the blog didn't. Maybe people want to engage with a different kind of content. Maybe they like the visual content better. Maybe if you recorded a short video, maybe you make like a reel and post something like that. So you use different content types versus just writing a blog and publishing that, because much to Lee's and my eternal heartbreak, people don't like to read stuff. And you need to come up with different kinds of content and deliver it in different ways, because not everybody digests content the same way. So that might be something to think about. Don't worry about making your videos absolutely perfect like they're made in Hollywood either. Just something. There's lots of tools out there. Lee introduced me to something called Loom, which is amazing. And that could be something that you might want to look into. Lee, do you have any other video tools? Because you're like always up on the hottest tips and tools.
I like Loom for lots of reasons. It's not expensive. It's super easy to use. You can tell who viewed it. So if you're doing like casual, this is what the CEO thinks videos, it's a great tool. Canva has one too. There's many. That's another tip. And I think we're going long. If you have to drop, totally get it. But that's another tip, Margarita's. It doesn't need to be too fancy. You see a lot of people making carousels or doing elaborate videos. You do not need to do that to be engaging. In fact, I mean, check out my social. My posts are super, super simple. I get good engagement.
Lee, you've written about staying number one in the platform, right? Writing shorter posts that allow people to stay in LinkedIn.
Yeah, exactly.
People do love photographs. They love videos. But of course, if you're going to do video, the video needs to be aligned with your long-term messaging, your long-term strategy as well, right?
Of course.
If you're saying, Margarita, you're going to cover, I don't know, e-commerce or quality or whatever it's going to be, those video topics need to be related. People love photographs of dogs. Whatever, if in doubt, post a photograph or an animal. And another thing that I would add, which is tricky, but I think very valuable. I had a meeting with a company yesterday who created a platform which incentivizes your clients to provide more social proof, which you can share with prospects. It was super, super interesting. It wasn't super cheap. If you're talking about creating trust, the more real feedback you can get from satisfied customers and find interesting ways of sharing that, I think that can be really helpful as well. Of course, the dreaded contracts, we don't want you to say this, we don't want you to say that. We have to get around that somehow. There's a few ways around it, but of incentivizing it, whether you make donations to charity on their behalf, whether you pay them in like Amazon vouchers, whatever it might be. But I think that could be another thing that you could experiment with is, who are the clients that I have? Who's going to say good things about me? How can I get it into a format that I can use or reshare or give to a prospect? That could be something to look into as well.
Okay, thank you. Good feedback. Appreciate it.
Indra is talking about basketball, and so we stress the importance of teamwork and skills we gain from sport, which I think is a great analogy. So I think the question is it a risk to use sports too much as a theme or as a differentiator or as a content topic? I don't know if it's a risk, is it?
I don't think so, as long as it's a sport everyone knows. Like Americans tend to use like football and baseball, and everybody's like, I don't understand what these sports are. Stick with sports people might understand potentially.
So I would say keep the basketball going, but you could bring in a few new sports and the dogs as well. And then Betty says, how can a small LSP measure the effectiveness of its strategies, of its differentiation strategies, and make adjustments? So how do we measure our effectiveness?
Key question.
Yeah.
By how it resonates in the market. So you're going to see correlated metrics like social followers increasing, web traffic increasing. Yeah, bye, Rodrigo. Thanks for joining. Those are correlations of a strong brand and strong differentiation. You also need to keep in touch with the market through conversations with your customers. What do you like about us? Why did you buy from us? And what your salespeople and account teams are seeing. There are some like literal metrics, traffic, et cetera, clicks, impressions, et cetera, to show if your messaging is resonating. But I really think the proof is in the conversations and what your customers are surfacing and saying over time.
And
Okay.
people reaching
Yeah.
out to ask to speak to you or whoever it is that's publishing on behalf of Ocean, for example. Like ultimately you want conversations with your clients. That's what this is all about. So
Yeah.
that would be the
Yeah.
ultimate metric, I think, to measure. This is great. I'm really happy with how this has gone. Everybody's engaged, everybody's interested. Lee, Mimi, thank you so much.
We love talking about this stuff. Literally, we can nerd out. Like I could talk about social for 4 days and differentiation and the fun of like, seriously, we can nerd out. So reach out. Yes, of course, Andre.
Your details are on the screen at the moment. You're on LinkedIn. You
Yeah.
have your websites as well. These ladies know so much, and I think can provide so much help to organizations of all shapes and sizes. So don't hesitate to reach out. If I can help anybody as well, please let me know. We really appreciate you guys joining today for our inaugural Meet the Giants webinar. Oh, I have another screen actually. I need to show, we have a slide. Our tentative next webinar is going to be in April, and it's going to be focused on life sciences this time. Our working title is about translation processes within clinical trials, and it's going to feature Betty Galliano, who has just spoken to us, and Susan Rosenthal, who was here earlier on but had to leave early. So that will be in April. But in the meantime, I just want to say a sincere, heartfelt thank you to Lee and Mimi. Thanks, ladies. Round of applause, or Boulevast, as we say in Ireland. That's been great. Thank you so much for your help. And thanks for everybody
Thank
for
you.
attending.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Have a great day,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.